And in a moment, so people should be starting to join us. Everyone, we'll just let people join in before I even make some introductions. I think we had about 20 people also registering this evening. I think I'm going to make a very quick start and mention to everyone that this session is being recorded and will go up onto the consultation website, which hopefully you can see in front of you right now. And in regard to this consultation, so first of all, thanks ever so much for joining us this evening, and hope you're keeping well. This is the consultation session in relation to the proposals to redevelop 1 to 5 Waylett Place in West Norwood. My name is Rajman Dare from Huddle Communications. I'm responsible for managing the consultation this evening, and funnily enough, happen to live just down the road in Tulse Hill. Some of you heard about this consultation from a leaflet you should have received in the post, or word of mouth, or posts, or on Facebook, or newsletters, for instance, from the Norwood Action Group. We've delivered 1,500 leaflets to homes closest and businesses closest to the site. And I know there'll be those people who have questions this evening and perhaps would like a further meeting or a briefing. More than happy to arrange those meetings and also send copies of the proposals, hard copies as well. Further information will be added to the consultation website as well. And I'm just going to, I think I mentioned a number of those things in regards to housekeeping, that this is being recorded in terms of how to ask questions on your screen. There is a Q&A function at the bottom, and we'll be looking to answer those questions towards the end of the session. We're going to have a presentation from Grid Architects, and I'm just going to quickly make, I've said enough for the moment, but I don't know if Ewan, who's an architect from Grid Architects, whether you wanted to say hello.
Yes, hi everyone. Ewan Barker, Grid Architects. Should I just say a quick few words about us?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I'm an associate at Grid, and we're relatively new practice. Well, actually, no, we've been around about 12 years now, but largely working within London. That's the main body of our work, in predominantly mixed-use residential-led schemes, much like Waylett Place, and we've done a few projects in Lambeth through planning and through to construction as well, and worked on quite a broad range of scales of building. But yeah, we consider ourselves sort of residential-led practice.
Perfect. And we have Arjun Lau from Boyer Planning.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Arjun Lau. I'm a planning consultant working for Boyer and their London office. And similar to Grid, a lot of the work that we do is residential focused mixed-use schemes across London and the southeast. Yeah, as well as London southeast, we operate across the rest of England as well, mainly the south of England. But yeah, that's all for me.
And we are also the proposals you may have seen on the leaflet as well. The applicant is Walborough Homes as part of Walborough Group. It's a family-run business. It's been founded for over 80 years ago, and they've successfully completed a number of residential projects, both in London and the South East. And you may see there's Matt Tilbrook there as well. Should there be any kind of specific questions for them, able to join us shortly as well. So in terms of the format of this evening, we're going to have a presentation from the architects, Ewan from Grid Architects, and then we'll move on to a Q&A session as well. We should hopefully be running this until just after, well, until 8 o'clock, but feel free to ask questions in the chat function, the Q&A function there below as well. And following on from this evening's session, you should receive a link that gives access to the poll that is on the website as well. I'll move on to the site. Over to you, Ewan.
Sorry, do I have control of the I can flick through the pages, can I?
You should be able to.
Okay, super. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, from the top. So the yes, so as it says here, the existing buildings on the site are largely in a state of poor state of repair. It's kind of got a backland, somewhat haphazard feel, which also contributes to a somewhat unsafe kind of pedestrian environment at present, with cars kind of overlapping with the road, and no permanent pavement. And there's a sort of mix of light industrial use, which that commercial space we will then we aim to sort of retain on site, but with change of use, but the same kind of quantum of commercial space retained. And then in the broader kind of context, in green wash here, this is the laundry site, 6 Lansdowne Hill, which has been consented for a mixed-use scheme, predominantly residential, to the end that connects to the west side, connecting up with the York Hill estate, and then a standalone office block, which is immediately south of our site. And then on the north side, you've got the B&Q site, which has recently been acquired by Lambeth. But their ownership also includes this orange arrow here. So this is this road here which provides the kind of exit from the B&Q, is in their private ownership. And then on the east side, you've got numbers 324 to 334 Norwood Road, sort of typical kind of Victorian terrace with sort of yard space to the rear, which is kind of ancillary space to those ground floor commercial units you see there. And then immediately south, the Waylett Place car park. Just a few views around the site. It's not much to sort of explain about these. Are quite sort of self-explanatory, but useful to show in context. On this first one, wait, can everyone see my cursor? As yeah. So our site sits just behind this row of terraces here, and then this is the access route to B&Q, where you see the application site here on the left, and then again this is exiting from the B&Q car park, looking south with the site there just behind. And again, this is from the B&Q car park, but at the raised level, looking over those rear yards to the terrace along Norwood Road, and then the site immediately behind that. And this brick wall that you see here sits within the B&Q ownership, which is a kind of key constraint on the proposals for the site. But in the future, when this site becomes redeveloped, we aim to kind of our design has been developed in a way which allows us to work as one with that proposal. And again, this is the site immediately in the foreground. So you're seeing some of those cars parked sort of within the public realm there. And then looking back towards Norwood Road. And then again, further back from on Norwood Road, pretty much opposite Chatsworth Way, looking up towards the site here. And then again, the site sits sort of behind the B&Q here. And then in terms of the context, there's quite a lot of richly decorated architecture along Norwood Road. There's some terrace buildings which are of low quality, but some of these examples here, you can see there's a lot of use of this interesting kind of white stucco detailing as a means of articulating the facade, which is something that we've gone on to pick up on in our proposals in order to create that link between the high street and this backland space that our site sits in. And then to the west of our site is the proposal for 6 Lansdowne Hill, the consented proposal, which has an architecture which connects much more so to the York Hill estate. And then just as I mentioned, St. Luke's Church is an obviously prominent feature in the context, and in terms of our massing, that's been developed with sensitivity towards that building and its setting. And then an important note in terms of the policy context, Lambeth's Site 18 allocation in the draft local plan talks about the importance of creating a new connection, which is pretty much where the B&Q private access road is from Norwood Road, creating an enhanced kind of public realm which improves the retail experience and the public realm experience off of Norwood Road, and then potential for a landmark taller building, which is roughly which overlaps with our site location. And that draft plan suggests up to 12 stories might be acceptable at that location. And again, I think we've touched on some of this already, but it's worth just going over in plan. The key constraints, all of that hatched area for the B&Q is in their ownership. So until that site is redeveloped, that's somewhat limiting in terms of any kind of vehicular access to our site. So for that, we're kind of limited to this hatched area at the front here, because it has to come from the adopted highways of Waylett Place. Other key constraints are setting out distances to the neighbouring properties and minimising potential overlooking there. In terms of overlooking to the Norwood Road properties, we see the upper levels as the greater concern, as the ground floors are all ancillary spaces serving ground floor retail. So again, as I was saying, the constraints of this site and the broader kind of policy context that it sits within means that our proposals have been developed in order that they work in the event that neither the B&Q site or the Norwood Road site come forward for redevelopment. And then in terms of heights, it's connecting with the heights of the Lansdowne Hill consent just to the west. But then equally, our proposal is set out in order to allow for the aims and aspirations of the Site 18 allocation in the draft plan to be achieved with that enhanced route through opposite Chatsworth Way, an improved public realm space that's behind Norwood Road, which could provide space for outdoor seating and restaurants in an environment that's somewhat kind of removed from the pollution and the noise of Norwood Road, but serves improve that retail offering as well. And then in terms of facade design, as I was saying, that we've been looking at the local context, and a predominant feature is this use of white stucco in order to articulate the facade against a buff brick, which we think is an appropriate material choice for our building. And then the base is picked out as a distinct treatment in order to emphasize the difference in function between residential uses above ground and commercial use at ground. And then just a little bit on the ground floor plan. So what happens here is that there's this one point really of arrival, as we as discussed, that from the public realm, and then what we've done is created a within our site a pavement that wraps around the whole site, which will allow for future development of the neighbouring sites in a way which creates a safe environment for pedestrians, and crucially active frontage along these facades, which will also enhance safety at ground level. And then, so this is the commercial use in red. Ancillary spaces are minimised in terms of their frontage to the public realm in order to maximise that kind of activation of the street frontage. And then both the private and affordable cores are entered through the same gated entrance from Waylett Place. So there isn't that kind of division of tenure. You know, it feels as one development. And then again, here you see the upper level plans. We present a gable, blank gable frontage to the rear of properties on Norwood Road in order to avoid any direct overlooking there. And then on the north side, in order to enable and to not restrict development on the B&Q site to the north, again, the facade's angled so that there isn't that direct overlooking where there could potentially be small separation distances between these two sites. And you can see again from these plans that there's a very, very high level of dual aspect apartments, almost all of them. And then the only apartment which isn't dual aspect is actually what we would call enhanced single aspect, where it has light and outlook from more than one direction, and crucially windows that can provide purge ventilation to avoid overheating. And then moving up through the building, you can see that the height starts to pull away as it steps back. Sorry, just one thing actually I skipped through on level one. I should come back on. This is a shared amenity space, so all tenures share the same outdoor amenity space at level one. And then again at the top level, there's this shared amenity space once again, which is accessible to all tenures, as well as a plant enclosure here to provide air source heat pumps for the building. And then in terms of the schedule, it's 30 dwellings overall with policy compliant ratios of affordable housing, which includes family sized dwellings. And again, the mix is fully compliant with Lambeth policy. Yeah, and now again on the amenity space, so you see here how both cores are able to access that shared amenity space, and that the provision of child play space and amenity is policy compliant. in excess of, in fact. And again, here we're showing how one of the key things we've done is managing the slope of the site, introducing a step in the ground floor plan, and a step again in the upper level plans, which matches this between the affordable block and the private block, which allows for active frontage, which in turn, active frontage in the scenario that the B&Q site is redeveloped, because this sits behind the B&Q wall, which is in their ownership. So this is again future-proofing and allowing for the realisation of the aspirations set out in the Site 18 allocation in the Lambeth local plan. And again, this is a diagrammatic representation of how that can be achieved, with the pink kind of representing commercial space, which is activating this bit of public realm relief from the high street. And in terms of vehicular access, the constraints and the topography of the site mean that that there's only really space to provide the single wheelchair accessible car parking space for the site. And again, this is also down to matters of pedestrian safety, that it's important that the existing pavements are very narrow and outside of our ownership. And so what we've had to do in incorporating pavements within our site is ensure that as pedestrians are walking along there, there's clear visibility between the car exiting, reversing out of the site and back onto Waylett Place. And at the same time, we also have to provide space for servicing of the substation. And then again, cycle parking spaces, it's fully compliant and in terms of numbers and compliance with the TfL cycling design standards, through a mixture of Sheffield stands, oversized stands, and two-tier racks. And as well as that, sorry, there's two on-street Sheffield stands to provide 4 short stay spaces. And then again, there's a common refuse store on the south side. Again, this all has to be located at this point in order to be accessible to refuse collection vehicles. So then, in terms of the architecture, the building sits between Norwood Road and Lansdowne Hill proposals, and so kind of acts as a kind of mediation between the two in many ways, taking architectural cues both from Norwood Road, as we discussed earlier, in terms of the white stucco surrounds, but in terms of the material palette, connecting with Lansdowne Hill, with the office block in terms of the use of buff brickwork and a distinct brickwork to the base. The other key thing is, in order to pick out the entrance to the building, we've articulated the core and the split in massing between the two blocks as a different material, which could be a lighter, either a lighter brickwork or a stucco, or a recon stone, that kind of material, to create that distinction between the two blocks. And then as part of a kind of future vision for how the broader site might be redeveloped, we think there's potential for the Waylett Place car park to be relocated and to create some kind of pocket park. And then this is from the B&Q site in the scenario of the B&Q site not yet being redeveloped. So again, here you see the serrated facade, and then the split between the two blocks and the articulation of that core in a different materiality, and then the horizontal language, which uses this horizontal white band and a recessed course of brickwork to pick out the sill line as well. And then again, in the scenario of the B&Q site being redeveloped, we see a strong pedestrianised connection from the York Hill estate back towards Norwood Road, and a high quality piece of public realm being developed between all three sites of Norwood Road, B&Q, and the 1 to 5 Waylett Place site, which can be then activated by retail frontage along here, or commercial space. So I think I hand it back over to Raj now in terms of next steps.
Yep, thanks, Ewan. So I wanted to go, before we get onto this slide here, a couple of things in regards to the consultation. First of all, you're happy. It'd be great if anyone here wishes to ask some questions here on the Q&A function. We've got a couple of questions that have come up, but feel free to ask some additional questions should you wish to. In terms of this consultation, this is our first consultation event. We are having one tomorrow as well. So if there's anyone who you know of who couldn't make this evening and would like to hear more, please let them know of the consultation that's taking place tomorrow. But more importantly, we're also happy to meet in person or have a kind of a Zoom call, Teams call with residents who are interested. I know a couple of, I think some residents and councillors have already messaged us in during the session that they'd be interested in a site visit as well. And one of the kind of questions that have come up on the chat function, so we've had, we'll get on to those two. So in terms of Walbro, so in terms of who they are, and whether they're acting for the site owners or have a party with an option, they actually have a long-term option on the site. And in terms of a question that's come up with, I think you can see it on the screen here as well. In terms of where we are in the process, we've had a pre-application meeting. We're having a couple. We're having one more as well. And in terms of a Boyer, in terms of Boyer as a consultant, so I think I'm not so sure the meaning there in terms of, so yes, Boyer has been a consultant previously for the Lansdowne Hill scheme, and in terms of, we don't know in regards to the timings in regards to the Lansdowne Hill scheme. And first question that has an additional question that's come up. Someone has asked in regards to, we're talking a lot about residents, and does that include consultation with businesses? Yes, it does. I'm more than happy to talk to businesses and residents as well in the local area. I believe leaflets are also going out to businesses as well. I'm more than happy to have a further conversation with you, should it be today or another session as well. So there have been a couple of questions in regards to design that have come through. So do you want to talk a little bit in regards to the design itself in terms of how the design itself relates to the local area of Norwood Road? I'm trying to think where a better slide it comes up.
Yeah, could you was there a specific question there?
In terms of how it relates to some of the kind of because a lot of the buildings are, in terms of the existing surroundings, a number of them are Victorian buildings. Is that right? In terms of, and how does this, our proposal relate to that?
Yeah. So yeah, it is a contextually driven approach where one of the key sort of things that we've picked up from a lot of the buildings along Norwood Road is the use of buff brickwork as a kind of the predominant sort of palette of the building, with the use of white elements to form the articulation of the facade, often with quite a horizontal expression. So we were keen on replicating that horizontality in the architecture, but at the same time making a building which isn't pastiche, but is of its time and part of a current New London vernacular. So yeah, so in terms of what we've picked up from that is the use of brickwork coursing to emphasize that that horizontal language, combined with the use of white as a means of articulating facades and rhythm and proportion in the building. So if I just flick from, probably best to flick to the CGIs, I think, to sort of show that. Yeah. So yeah, so what we have is a recessed corbelled course, which is in a different tone of brickwork, which is actually the same tone as used in the base of the building, and then again picking up that the window head, as well as the sill, and again framing the windows, much as the has been done on Norwood Road, but at the same time taking that and making it a modern interpretation of that.
Thanks, Ewan. And another question is, and I guess much of the scheme in terms of 30 homes, you've talked about the residential part of the scheme. We've got a question here. It's come from the chat function. Please remember the best to send questions via the Q&A function, because it makes it easier to scroll down. But someone who here has asked, so what's going to happen to the existing businesses, the garages themselves, and the drawing suggests retail and not light industrial, which is in greater need. That we have an additional comment alongside that. We have 250 plus shops on the high street, but a long waiting list for those seeking the noisy, messy kind of workspace. I think this is someone who's sent a message to the local business improvement district manager. So in terms of the employment space, I think I'll go back here to on the ground floor, so I think that's probably the best image for it. But Arjun, am I right in thinking that in terms of the designation for the use on the ground floor, it's not actually specified or limited to a retail provision? Is that right?
No, they're correct, Raj. So the proposed employment provision for this site is more so commercial, retail orientated. Now, due to the prevailing residential context associated with site allocation 18, we felt that the existing uses, and so as along with the planning officers, that the existing uses, light industrial uses, would not be compatible with the prevailing or proposed residential uses, and nearby public open space, as they would cause issues such as noise disturbance. So in turn, we've sought to provide office space which will be able to accommodate an equal number of employees, not a greater number of employees. And just to touch on that point about the need for light industrial uses, Lambeth will also have allocations or areas across the borough or nearby where they will seek to kind of locate those sorts of uses and promote those sorts of light industrial uses for those who need them. So although there will be a loss of a light industrial use here, the local plan works in a way that it will facilitate that need elsewhere for these businesses.
Thanks, Arjun. And I was going to go back to in terms of design, in terms of what the design brief is. We've got a question here in regards to whether the scheme is very much goes to you, and I imagine in terms of the design itself and the materials that we're using, matching some similar buildings. Is that has that been determined by a brief, or is there kind of greater scope in regards to some of the materials that are being proposed?
No, that's not something that was determined by the brief. That's something that's been the product of an iterative design process, and as part of our planning application process, as well as going through the process of rationalizing and justifying our design approach through pre-application meetings, we'll set out in the DAS, the design and access statement, which will be publicly accessible for viewing, the different options that we've explored, because that's what you don't necessarily see here, that there's been a range of options explored, and we felt that this was the most appropriate contextual response for this site. So that isn't something that's been driven by a client brief or anything like that. It's coming from largely from the architects, really, in terms of how we feel is the most appropriate way to respond to the constraints and the context of the site.
Thank you. A question that has been raised so prior to the session has been. Oh, sorry. One of the councillors has asked a question. As I mentioned earlier, we're more than happy to meet with councillors or residents up on site. I think I've actually sent an email to one of the councillors as well just a moment ago. So we're more than happy to meet and speak on site. But a question about the site itself, and sometimes we've referred it to as Site 18. So some of you will be aware of a consultation that took place earlier in the year, run by the council, by Lambeth Council, and they have talked about kind of a 12-story element for a building as part of that site. We take up a part of that site 18.2, but these proposals are for a kind of a detailed planning application that we've been working on. It's separate from the consultation that Lambeth will be running. We're in discussions with, we're having a further pre-application meeting about the proposals that we're looking to deliver, which are the ones that have been shown to you this evening. And part of this is really to take feedback from residents when we're looking at, in terms of the timings of the process from our end. It's looking at a submission of a planning application, a detailed application with additional reports alongside the application in May, and then for Lambeth Council to run a consultation in relation to a scheme in May or June, and ultimately a decision to be made by Lambeth Council at a planning committee, we think in the autumn, and potential work to start commencing in spring 2023. But that, I have to say, is that's assuming that all things go well and everything stick to timings. But I've got a question here, very important question, is what level of affordable housing is being proposed as part of the development? So yes, this site will include a provision of affordable housing, and I understand it's going to be policy compliant in regards to what Lambeth are looking for. But Arjun, did you want to talk a little bit further about that in terms of the provision of affordable housing?
Yeah, I'm very happy to do so. So, Walbrook recognise the need for affordable housing within Lambeth, and therefore we're looking to provide a policy compliant mix. So, with regards to the affordable housing provision, this will be at 35% of the total unit numbers by habitable room. So, of the affordable housing provision of 10 units, 7 or 70% of those units will be provided under affordable social rent, for which there is a greater need, and 3 or 30% will be provided as intermediate homes. So we're looking to deliver a policy compliant scheme in terms of affordable housing, and very much playing and working to the needs of the borough and what planning officers have asked of us.
Okay, brilliant, thanks, Arjun. And for those, there's a kind of broad kind of accommodation schedule there. Ewan, do you want to talk a little bit further in regards to where we think, or where the location of kind of affordable housing as part of the development?
So in terms of the split.
That's right. So in terms of the location within the building or the proposals.
Yeah. So oops, if I'm able to control this. So it's probably easier to go back from ground floor. So from ground floor, you can see the private and affordable intermediate units are accessed turning left here once you're within this yard space, and then the affordable social rented units to the right, and then the affordable social rented lift actually allows you to connect through to the top floor. But in effect, the units here that are at the south east corner of the site are the affordable social rented units. And then within the taller element of the building, it's a mixture of private and affordable intermediate.
And just on that, in terms of access to amenity space, you mentioned that the both lifts go to the top.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant.
So there's no difference between tenures in terms of the access to shared amenity and play space.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ewan. I'm going to move on. I'm going to wrangle around to find out where the next question is. So there's another question here in terms for a question in regards to servicing. So mentioned the commercial space earlier. So how will the building be serviced for deliveries and waste storage? I'm afraid, Ewan, I'm going to go back to you and move it to the ground floor slide there.
Yeah, again, this is something that we'll have to provide further information for as part of the planning application process. But as discussed, we are limited in terms of servicing space to basically this zone and then east from here along Waylett Place. So what we'll have to do is to demonstrate that there's space for a vehicle to stop off on the road along here without preventing the flow of traffic as it exits from the B&Q site, and to demonstrate that we're certainly improving on the current condition. Because we should bear in mind that this line, the site boundary, represents the current location of the building envelope, in effect, which has additional associated parking on this exit route. So yeah, we'll certainly be able to demonstrate that we're able to provide a safe drop-off zone that allows for servicing the building without restricting that movement, that vehicular movement. And yeah, that further information there will be provided both through the pre-application process, and it'll be within the design and access statement and the full planning application in time.
Thanks, Bjorn. An additional question has come in terms of the how long would the build take, and what provision will there be for necessary building works, infrastructure, delivery, works vehicles? I'm thinking about the disruption to businesses, what was already a narrow and congested high street. So a couple of questions in terms of the time process for works. So, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Arjun, looking envisaged between 18 to 18 months to 2 years, so starting potentially from spring 2023 at the earliest. Is that a fair assessment in terms of the time for works to take place?
Yeah, so the construction phase is anticipated to take around 18 months. And as prior to sort of commencing that stage, we'll be required to submit a construction management plan. And this will need to be signed off by the council before any works can begin. And this report will sort of detail how traffic will be routed around the site in a safe way to avoid congestion. It will detail limitations on the days of work and hours of work as well, and also provide the necessary measures to minimise disturbance to residents, say from noise or dust as well. But just to clarify, that will need signing up from the council before any works can begin.
Thanks, Arjun. And a question that was asked. So, not necessarily related to kind of disruption during the construction process, but provision for necessary infrastructure, and that's often the question that's asked in regards to when there's a planning application and the impact, or how does a planning application cater for the increase of demand for local services. So as part of the planning application, there's a requirement for the developer to provide something called a community infrastructure levy, which is worked out by the area, or the number of square meters of part of the development. It's based on a formula that the council have set, and then that goes to the council to determine which services it goes onto. No, it's not only an answer question. A question that's answered by planning consultants, but I think that's a fair assessment in terms of what contributions are made to local infrastructure. That was to you, Arjun. Sorry, I should have.
Oh yeah. So yeah, in terms of we get this question quite a lot. So in terms, like you already said, Raj, in terms of sort of offsetting that impact on, say, local services, Walbro will be required to pay a sill charge, which, as you mentioned, is calculated by the total amount of floor space which is being built, and all of that money tends to be ring fenced for local services such as schools, GP services, to help them sort of accommodate, say, an increase in the local population as well.
Thank you. And a question here has come through in regards to going back to the kind of the planning process. So question is, are we looking to aim for a fast track planning application? And could you explain what a fast track planning application is before you answer that?
So yeah, the fast track route that is being referred to relates to affordable housing provision. So something that the Mayor's London Plan has done is it's created this fast track route where, for sites such as this, if you provide a 35% affordable housing provision, it won't be subject to a viability assessment. And that threshold is greater for publicly owned land. But the rationale behind this is to basically speed up the delivery of affordable housing, and that's a core part of the Mayor's London Plan and the local plan here in Lambeth, because often sites and provisions and applications are subject to viability assessments, which can take quite a while. And this is all underpinned by an aim to increase the speed at which affordable housing is delivered. So in this case, we are making the most of that in order to help assist with that delivery of affordable housing.
Just one thing in addition to that, the other aspect of that is retention of the existing amount of employment space in order to be policy compliant for the fast track process, which we've done in terms of our proposals. So there's no loss of employment space, as well as the provision of 35% affordable housing.
Thanks both. And a question in regards to for these consultation sessions is the level of provision of parking. So there's only one car parking space part of this development. I guess, why is that the case? And also the location of the car parking space, which I think funnily enough, I happen to be on that side, which is there. And I don't know, Arjun, perhaps going back to you, could you talk why there's only one car parking space that's provided as part of this development?
Yeah, so in terms of car parking provision, so in accordance with the London plan and the site's high accessibility rating, we're seeking to provide a car-free proposal, and that's with the aim of kind of encouraging sustainability. However, we do note that there is a need to provide disabled car parking, hence why we've provided disabled car parking space, as you can see on the screen down below.
And you mentioned the accessibility rating, is that determined of how one is able to walk or cycle to a bus stop or a train station or have access to public transport? So the accessibility rating, or it's also known as PTAL, so the public transport accessibility level, which is rated from 0 to 6B, with 6B being the highest. And the higher the rating is a reflection of how available and how close by and the amount of public transport links you have available to you. So our site benefits from a rating of 6A, which is quite high. So there is, it's likely that future residents will be able to sort of would rather make use of public transport links, such as the train stations, West Norwood, Tulse Hill, and the various bus stops along the high street. And that kind of informs why we've gone with a car-free development, because the public transport infrastructure can cope with that demand. And that's also something that's been led by the mayor and also by local authorities such as Lambeth. Is that fair to say? Yeah, very much. And that all ties into the whole aim of being sustainable and active travel. Thank you. And we've got a question here in terms of how many of the homes will be accessible or have disabled access. So you mentioned that the one car parking space will be for disabled access. Could we perhaps answer that at all in the location of them? I think that there are 3. Am I right in saying that? And I don't know if you might be able to answer to the locate or the potential location of them.
Yes. Not. So yes, you're right. In it's 3 homes, which are that's the number that's kind of required by policy to be wheelchair adaptable. And I can't remember off the top of my head where they are. Let me just get... No, don't worry, Ian. So we'll pause for that moment. That's helpful. So there's one here at level 4 in the affordable provision, and then I'm struggling to remember where the other 2 sit. And then this one at level 6, private unit, and there must be a 3rd one somewhere. That's not a problem. But that's on the basis of the idea that I think the requirement to target to provide 10% of those homes to be wheelchair accessible. Sorry, this one at level 1 is the one. Perfect. Yeah. Great. And in terms of, let's go. And so I could say just a couple of words on the sort of additional provisions that we need for a wheelchair accessible dwelling. I mean, typically they're required to be a little bit larger than the kind of minimum nationally described space standard sizes, which match the London plan sizes. So that's in order to provide a larger kitchen, because obviously kitchen units You can't have as many under-counter units and over-counter units. And there's a wheelchair charging zone next to the doorway, as well as a larger bathroom and larger sort of general space provision around beds in order to be able to access windows.
Thank you. You've got a question going back to something you talked about a little bit earlier in regards to Site 18 and the consultation that the council have run. So that was my, I'm being asked a question when were we first aware of those, or the consultation in regards to the site itself. So in my case, it's probably when Norwood Action Group raised it earlier this year. But in terms of the, in terms, we were not aware, right in saying this, and I'll correct me wrong, is we weren't aware of that consultation ahead of discussions with Lambeth.
No, so when we had our first pre-app meeting last year in 2021, we weren't aware of when the consultation was going to take place for the draft site allocations plan. But I note that it took place and ended in February. But yeah, we weren't 100% sure on when that consultation was going to take place. We found out at the same time the public would have.
And in terms of mentioned in terms of disabled access, so 3 of the homes are going to be can be adapted for disabled access, but we're only looking to provide 1 disabled car parking space on the site. Is there a particular reason for that? Is that acceptable in terms of what the council would be looking for?
So I guess it's been a balance of with the existing location for, as Ewan mentioned earlier, the existing location for the disabled car parking space. We wanted to ensure pedestrian safety as well, so the pedestrians had enough sort of a view of the car parking space before they moved out in front of it. And due to that arrangement, only the one parking space would be able to be provided to ensure that level of safety. But we do recognise that this is the kind of the optimal arrangement that we've come up with so far with regards to parking for disabled users.
I want to flag to everyone that I know it's almost coming up to 8 o'clock. So if there are any other kind of additional questions that you feel as if I've not answered or not addressed it adequately, or if there's anything else that comes to mind, feel free to ask right now. There are other methods of kind of getting in contact with us as well. I mentioned the consultation website, which is waylettplace.com. There is, hopefully you received this in the post, and you can send responses back in by free post. And there's our email address as well, engage at waylettplace.com, and our free phone telephone number 0800 433 2622. And I'm just going to go towards one of the last slides, also waiting for any other additional questions. So I mentioned the timeline as well. So we're looking at a submission in June, and the council to run their consultation regards this application the following month, and potentially a determination of planning application in the autumn. Whilst we're still waiting for some additional questions, you mentioned that all but one of the homes were dual aspect, and the home that is single aspect, you mentioned it was enhanced single aspect, but in terms of the direction it's facing, do you mind me asking what direction is it facing?
It's south facing.
It's south facing. Perfect. Yeah. So there are no north facing single aspect units part of this development. That's good to hear. And I'm just waiting to see if there are any other additional questions. So look if there's anything else. But as I mentioned, we'll be back here tomorrow evening at the same time, 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, to answer the same, well, hopefully some additional questions as well from residents. And as I mentioned earlier, we're more than happy to meet with you should that be of interest too, or happy to meet virtually. So thanks ever so much. We've come up to 8 o'clock, and we will call an end to this evening's session. So goodbye from me. Thanks, Ewan, for the presentation. I don't know if you wanted to say goodbye to everyone.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being part of this consultation and sharing your thoughts and questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Your questions are very useful, as well as your input. We'll take them away and incorporate them in whichever way we can. So yeah, thank you very much appreciated.
As Arjun mentioned there, so your comments and feedback that comes through, it's really important that we get as much feedback as possible, because that feedback goes into a report that we at Huddle end up writing, a statement of community involvement that looks at how we've consulted residents and businesses and community groups ahead of submitting a planning application as well, and how we've looked at addressing them. So thank you ever so much, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi guys.